You are listening to Aspect Ratio, a film and video game podcast, episode 1. Today we're going to be talking about Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. All right, and hello everybody. We are your hosts, Spooky Deer, and I'm joined by the Rodgers Academy.
Hello, and this is Aspect Ratio, the show where we choose either a movie, game, or something else book, if we ever read books anymore.
Who's literate?
Not me, but today is our very first episode we're ever recording, so if this goes to an entire dumpster fire, at least I can burn the recording along with myself. Today...
Wow.
This will be fun to go back to. Today we are going to be talking about DreamWorks' Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, but before we go deep diving into that movie, because that'll be our main topic to discuss, we're going to do some housekeeping things because it is our first episode, and because we like shooting the shit just a little bit.
Oh yeah, you always got to shoot the shit a little bit at the start, because if we just get into the meat, then what's the point? If we just give you what you want, well, why would anyone want that?
We're essentially saying you have to listen to us for 10 minutes, or maybe 20 minutes if we go too steamrolling, and then you can get to the content. Luckily, most services let you scrub, so if you really hate it, I mean, I guess you could fast forward and be like, are they talking about that Puss in Boots movie yet? So, trust me.
I came here for Antonio, yeah.
If you really hate our voices, I understand.
I don't. I am going to take it really personally.
Yeah.
We're turning comments off on YouTube, so...
Oh, we're uploading to YouTube now? Oh, that's good.
Yeah,
we must be successful. We must be getting 10 views per video.
Oh, hell yeah. At minimum. Sometimes 12. But yeah, so, I mean, with this being episode 1, obviously we have ideas of what the course of this podcast is going to be, what our general structure is going to encompass. But, it'll evolve over time depending on what we like. But we figured at the very least we should talk about what some of the goals are with Aspect Ratioed, and then we got some fun little stuff that we'll do before we get into the real meat of the sandwich, which obviously will be Puss in Boots. So, Rodgers, what are our goals with this podcast? Well, we thought that it would be cool to talk about movies because we do all the time anyway.
You're just like I'm losing it. I'm losing it, folks. I'm losing.
Yeah,
I'm losing. I am technically the one who incepted this idea. I went full Christopher Nolan, and I went into Spooky's memory bank, and I said, we're going to do a podcast about movies finally, but also games.
And I woke up in a cold sweat, and I was like, I love talking. And here we are. I've got a Google Doc in front of me, and we've got a whole lot of things.
You're not just supposed to name drop Google. They're come after us for copyright infringement for using their product.
Fuck, I have a generic word processor in front of me with words written on it, which is going to guide the course of this conversation. Maybe. But in more serious note, we actually are somewhat content creators, as I'm more of a former content creator, and the other one here, Spooky, is a more active content creator. If you want to tell about what you do, Spooky. For sure. I mean, I guess in fairness, you helped me create a lot of my content, so it's like it's kind of we're an ecosystem of things. But yeah, like me, Spooky_Deer. I've been streaming on Twitch for the last couple of years. I've branched out into YouTube as well. Rodgers has been my editor-in-chief, helping me kind of put everything together. And through the course of that, obviously, we just end up talking a lot. We have a lot of shared interests. And one of those main things is film, and the other main thing is video games, which conveniently is what we're going to talk about today, and is what makes up the focus of a lot of the other content that we both do ourselves.
Yeah, true. The funny context here I want to provide just for the 5 people who listen to this episode,
the deep lore, yeah.
And then maybe the 30 people who listen to this episode, if this starts to pick up and they're like, oh, we got to go back to episode 1, is I started out, well, we've used to be coworkers back in 2015, and then there's a time jump where we don't talk to each other, and then I see you streaming on Twitch, and I'm like, oh, that's cool, let's reconnect. And then I'm like, hey, I like video editing, let me edit your videos. And then
I go, hey, that Twitch thing you do, I think I can do it better. And then I start Twitch streaming. And then I go, this is a lot of work. I'm retiring. And then there's a gap again. And then I'm like, I can edit your videos again because I think I would like to edit again. And then I'm like, what if we did a podcast? So that's how this came to be.
You ride these roller coaster waves of being like, yeah, I'm going to do that. And then for the record, everyone out there in internet land, Rodgers did do streaming better than me. Let the metrics show.
Analytically, by the metrics, I did do better.
You were crushing it during the same time that we were both active, and then you tapped out, and I continued to get stronger, and now I am incredibly powerful.
Yep, and you're playing all the games that you love, and you totally don't regret anything that you decided to do as a challenge or anything.
Never, no, because I'm literally becoming physically stronger doing it. If you want more context, I don't know, Google it.
There's in the description of this podcast, there'll be little like links to ping you in the right direction. So,
is that possible? Oh my god, I have no idea. That's cool.
I'm making this up as I go.
We're assuming a lot.
I'm assuming links can be linked in descriptions of podcasts. If they can't, then at least I can write a fancy description telling you where to type it in.
That's exactly. We'll Google it for you. Yeah, save you some work.
However,
getting the minecart back on the rails.
We do. We're gonna keep interrupting each other because
we're not used to this yet.
Yeah,
we're 800 miles away from each other. There's no facial cues to be like, shut your dumb mouth. I'm talking.
However, we do have a format we're looking to go for, and every format I think breeds success in some way. And the format for this podcast is that we want to open it up essentially with a prompt that we both give each other off screen or off microphone, and essentially say, hey, I'm going to give you this question. I want you to come to the podcast with an answer. It's going to be related to, movies, media, games, just something to have a nice opening conversation. And then we'll roll right into the meat and bones, which will be the topic of the day, whether it's, a movie, game. So today it's Puss in Boots. And then we'll close it out with just some fun little like games to close it out with, or just conversation pieces. And then we'll be done for the day. So to the two people that come back, I appreciate you listening to this segment. So Spooky, what is the prompt that you came with me today for?
Okay, so the prompt that I came up with was, what is your favorite bit of camera work in a film? And this can be, far reaching as like a long sequence, like a oneer, or it can be something that's just a blip, but something that sticks out to you. And I have my own answer for this, but I want to know what your favorite bit of camera work in a film is.
I hated this prompt so much when he gave it to me. I really did.
You were mad. I was kind of surprised.
I was mad because there's so many good things out there that you're making me then have to make a decision. And I can't just give the default answer of like, oh yeah, this thing gonna be done. Like, right. I have to think. And
I mean, and in fairness, it's not what is unequivocally the best. I don't want to get flamed in any various comment pools that are and wherever this is getting posted. It's like, there's your favorite bit, and there's what is objectively the best, which I think is also really hard to quantify. So, just for the sake of that.
So what I decided to go with is, I think there's so many great movies. I think Old Boy has probably like the best oneer of just, like full camera tracking shot of just all this action going on. It's taken in one take. And I think the oneer has become a very sexy thing for a lot of people to do nowadays because it is so engaging. But I think is the safe answer, and whether that ends up being your answer, that's totally fine. It's just more, I figured I want to go with something that you don't see all the time, but when you do see, I think a lot of people don't appreciate it, which is my example is in the 1986 movie Highlander. And in the opening sequence of the movie, there is a fight in an underground parking garage, and then it technically jumps around a little bit, and then the main character, Connor McLeod,
Oh man, I really hope it's Connor McLeod. I'm gonna get flamed by some film person.
I'll look it up right now to
It's
save
been
your life.
it's been 15 years since I watched this movie. However, I remember this shot. He has to escape the parking garage in his car, and the way they do this sequence is that they attach the camera to the trunk of the car. So it's just him driving, and it's the camera mounted on the car, and it's this really cool frame of just swerving through the parking lot. And I think that camera tactic is so great because it locks you in a position in heavy movement, but it doesn't like lose any of the naturalness of it. Because it's just so cool to see, hey, this fast speed moving vehicle, but we're on the vehicle, so we feel like we're in the car with him. And I think when you see that, it just makes you feel more engaged to the sequence rather than just seeing a faraway shot of a car driving fast.
Yeah.
Actually being in the car is really nice. And funny enough, I think that's, we will talk about this in Puss in Boots, but there is a sequence where they attach the metaphorical camera, because it's all animation, to an object that floats around. So that's the thing you're attached to, and you see all these characters trying to interact with it. And I think when you start attaching cameras to objects that aren't like just stale and actually are in movement is so interesting, because then you get these interesting perspectives all in motion.
Okay, that's I like that answer for a lot of reasons. I think what's going to become a recurring theme with this podcast is how much I love work that is done in camera. This isn't me taking a stance against like VFX or CGI, because I think that some really amazing things are done with that too, but I just love the physical magic of like putting a camera on something or in something, and it grounds it in the scene and in the scenario. And like to your point, it kind of like it puts you into it. So that's interesting. I haven't seen Highlander, and for the record, you did get the character's name right, so you've dodged a bullet there.
Highlander is definitely a pulpy classic where it might not be the best movie, but there is like definitely a fan base around it that spawned a ton of movies. And I did watch those growing up. However, just to point out the whole, not saying anything against VFX. If any VFX purist is about to flame Spooky, my prompt will at least give you at least a moment to maybe pump the brakes.
I can redeem the statement because I land on both sides. I have strong feelings about both things, and I think when they're done well, that's what I want. I don't want it to be a cop out, and I think there are often instances where if you do something in camera or in real life, it's obviously going to be more natural because it is natural. So
exactly.
That's all I'm saying. Should I answer my own question?
Yes, I think you should answer your own question.
Okay. Because mine it's kind of interesting. I was like, for a moment, I was like, can you imagine? Like, what if he says the exact same thing that I was going to? I'm
worried. I am worried for my prompt that we're going to have the same answer.
I'm curious about that too. That's going to be very interesting. So for my favorite bit of camera work in a film, and I've had a long obsession with this scene, and I think it's kind of funny because when I've pointed it out to friends, they've been like, "What the fuck are you talking about? Like, what are you even saying?"
Yeah.
So, one of my, I think I will say in this moment, my number one favorite film of all time, The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. There's a scene early on. It's when Frodo and Sam are making their way out of the Shire, and then they end up bumping into Merry and Pippin. The group starts growing. They fall down the hill when they get chased by the farmer, and
he goes, "I think I broke something," and then
I think I broke something. He's got the carrot in his hand, and then they go, mushrooms, and they run and get their mushrooms. Yeah, I can recite the whole movie. Believe me,
I can too. Trust me.
But it's like kind of in like all this like scrabble of like hobbits being hobbits. Suddenly, Frodo gets this kind of weird sensation, right? That the Nazgul are around. They're looking for the ring, and there's this scene where he looks down the road that they're on, and it does this bit of camera movement, which was it famously
I know
invented by Alfred Hitchcock. You know what I'm talking
I know
about?
exactly. It's that
The
shot.
vertigo effect.
Yep, the vertigo.
It's the vertigo effect where they have the camera on a dolly. They're pushing the camera forward, but they're zooming out, maintaining the same focal length. So it literally condenses the entire road in this really unsettling way. And then Frodo goes, "Get off the road, quick!" And it's that one. It's like a 2-second shot tops of this vertigo effect, and the dread that it imparts from such a simple in-camera motion has stuck in my mind since, God, how old was I when I saw Fellowship of the Ring? I was probably like, I'm doing like rough maths right now. It was probably like 8, maybe 9.
I was 4.
Jesus Christ, I'm
I know.
old. But when I saw that, even in that moment, I was like, wow, that's interesting. And that shot has stuck out to me for so long that I wrote a paper on it in college. Like, it's funny, the things that stick out to you. So that's my favorite bit of camera work in the film. And
And
it's nothing crazy, you know, but it does such an economical job of, you know,
well,
conveying what you're supposed to feel without fully even knowing what that is.
before this turns into a Lord of the Rings podcast, because this can
There will be time for that. It'll be a special edition. Yeah.
there'll be this can easily turn into a Lord of the Rings podcast. But to that moment, just following up, is when that camera effect happens. I think it's the first real time in the movie where you feel like there's actual imminent danger, and it is followed up by probably one of the most intense sequences at the time in movies, which was they're all hiding in that little hole, and you have all the bugs crawling on them, and it's just like you feel like, oh, they're gonna get caught. It's like it's all that atmosphere is all set up through that first camera shot, like
Absolutely.
that sets up that whole sequence, because you're like, that's kind of eerie and puts me off guard, and then everything that follows is like, I was supposed to be eerie and off guard for this moment.
And boy, did it work. Yeah. It's like, you know, that's a good point. I'd never really thought about it like that, but that is like the first time since being introduced to the Shire that you're like, there's something more going on in the wider world. Like that illusion of safety starts to break down, pretty directly.
Yep.
God damn! Look at Rodgers with the big brain.
I want to say more, but I'm like, it's going to turn into a Lord of the Rings podcast. That is not what this episode is. That is not what this podcast is.
I know.
So easy. It's so
Stay
easy
focused, brothers. Yeah.
So I said Highlander. You said Fellowship of the Ring. Two very interesting choices, just because I think people always like to go to like the oneer or like the big group shot,
or like the Citizen Kane, like pulling in from the snowman to the house, like
So it's a good prompt, and I was mad about it more because it's like I had to think and I couldn't just give an easy answer. But following that,
I hope to maintain that level of quality throughout the entirety of this production.
This is probably going to be the best episode, and that's saying something. But saying that, you gave me that prompt, and then I had a prompt for you, and that was one of your favorite movies that uses a lot of CGI, or a movie you think has just one of the best uses of CGI. Because there are movies that are like, they have an entire CGI character the entire time on screen, or they're no CGI for most of the movie, but they have that one sequence with CGI that you think just absolutely nails it. So it doesn't have to be just like, oh, it's all visual effects the entire movie like Avatar. It can be either a small segment or just the whole movie is very featured with it.
Right on. I think, you know, it's a really good question. It very, very nicely ties into like talking about Puss in Boots, which is obviously all computer generated. As far as I know, no real cats were used in the making of that production.
We're going to be proven wrong by someone like a year from now who like comes in and listens and goes, they had a fucking real cat. Did you not see the sequence with the real cat? And I'm like,
what on God's green earth are you talking about? But I like this one because there's a lot of different directions you can go with it. When you first sent me this prompt, the like asshole in me was like, I should say, The Rock's appearance in The Mummy.
It's a great. I love that movie.
I like how corny it is. I like how like kind of shitty the Scorpion King's appearance is in The Mummy, but that's not what I'm going to talk about.
And also, just putting one more note on that, like when you actually listen to the VFX artists that worked on that movie talk about it, it's actually pretty like holy shit. Yeah, it's impressive they made that because of how little they had.
I like. Honestly, those interviews are a gift because I always want to know. You know, it's like nobody sets out to make something that looks like shit.
Yeah,
it's like there's a lot of factors working against them.
When they release it, they typically know it looks like shit. They're not like, oh yeah, we're proud of this. They're like, like we wish we had more, but we are proud at least what we were able to accomplish with what we had or the time.
Exactly.
We had.
Another few months would have done wonders on that. But yes, my favorite use of CGI. I think for me, it would have to be, there was this kind of like golden era in like the mid 2000s where I felt like VFX studios were still given what I would consider like a reasonable amount of time to pull off the effects that that's like being asked of them.
Absolutely.
We've gotten a lot crunchier in Hollywood, and I think that crosses over into a lot of different production type warehouses. I'm not going to get on my soapbox in the first episode. We can dig into that later.
I know what it is. Your favorite CGI movie is Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania.
Couldn't tell you that I even knew that was out right now. Sorry,
fair
Disney.
Enough.
No, for me, it's from kind of this like peak era where there was like still time being given to artists to really like pull off incredibly convincing and honestly like well-aged visual effects. And for me, it's got to be Davy Jones in Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest. Like, he is like, that character feels so real and so grounded in that movie. And like, when did Dead Man's Chest even come out?
2005? No, 2006.
2006.
Yeah.
Look at Davy Jones look at a picture of Davy Jones right now and tell me that has aged like
so
fine wine.
I actually watched the last like the big 20-minute fight in at World's End, also having
so
Davy
good
Jones.
Oh my god,
it's watching that, it's like the cynic part of me is like, they don't make movies like they used to, and I'm like, I know it's only like a decade or so removed, but like that whole final
but they don't make movies like they used to.
I'm like, how do they get all this on what I assume is the same budget for like these typical Marvel movies and big superhero movies? And it's like, how did we lose this touch? Because it's insane.
It's crazy. Like I recently did a full rewatch of the Pirates series, and like, you know,
wait. Have your 1 through 5, 1 through 5, or 1 through 3?
1 through 3.
Okay.
My Pirates series.
Yeah. There's no.
That's 4 and 5. We don't need to talk about because that's when it starts getting weird.
Spooky. The correct answer was there was a 4th and 5th one.
Unfortunately, I was the 4th one was forced upon me at an undergrad, whatever. It doesn't matter. It was undergrad bonding time when I was like a freshman in college. But I rewatched, you know, Black Pearl, Dead Man's Chest, and At World's End, and like, brother, those are a moviegoer's movie. Like, there's just something like those hit so good, and like, say what you will about any aspect of it, and I'm like, I had more fun watching the Pirates movies again than I have in a long time with other things that have come out in theaters, and it's a shame. But I'm old and jaded too, so like, don't read too much into that.
You're not that old, but I do think that the Pirates movies are a great example of, I feel like movies used to be like epics, and I know that that's actually an argument for movies back in like the 50s and 60s. Like, what happened to the epics where we had these 3-hour, 4-hour movies? And I agree. Like, I know people get mad about the whole like, oh, I don't want to go to the bathroom or all this, but like, I would rather
just piss your pants. Be brave.
Be bold. Piss your pants.
Be bold. Piss your pants.
A Spooky Deer endorsement.
You have my permission. Don't worry.
You have my permission to piss. No, I think
the Pirates movies have an interesting element of they do feel like epics when you watch it. Like you feel like you're on a grand adventure, and it's not just for the trilogy of like it's I'm trying to wait to get the whole story. It's like each movie individually feels like an epic, and I think we've lost that touch because of how much we've tried to franchise everything.
Yes.
Like, and I know it sucks because like Marvel did actually have, I think, a good start to a lot of this stuff, but because they became so big, they set everyone else up for that, where it's like we all have to be a franchise. If you're making something, it has to have spin-offs, it has to have connecting pieces, it has to be a part
has to have this multiverse bullshit, which I'm reining myself back in. It's fine.
It's not what the discussion is today on. However,
right.
I just think, with the CGI in the Pirates movies, especially Davy Jones, it's an interesting lens to look through, because you're just like, wait a minute, this is how old? And this looks better than things released in 2023 with more money? Like, huh?
With more money, more technology, more resources and know-how, more efficiency. Like everything theoretically should be better. We should be like the things that are being made with visual effects should theoretically look so much better than they do right now. And I think there's a lot of angles for why it doesn't. And I actually think some of the issue is because it's so easy to do now. Yeah. In the obviously I can't walk out and do it. I'm not saying that, but it's like in the grand scheme of things, it is much more attainable to create visual effects than it has been in the past. And I think that's part of the reason why it doesn't look so good, because they had to do tricky things to gloss over where it didn't look good. They had to do more things in camera. They had to do more with having like real actors on set, and like literally it had to be more grounded because they couldn't do it straight from the computer. They needed more reference. And I think that there are still times now where it's like when there's like good CG, like there's a reason for it. And it's because it was done more collaboratively and it was given the respect that it needed to look good. So it's like, I'm not a CG hater. I'm a hater of like we'll just fix it in post kind of mentality. It's like, I want things to be done intentionally because then they work.
You hate the fact that there's like 3 actors sitting in a green room and everything is just constructed around them. And not because it's, we're in a digitized world and this is the way we have to do it. It's no, we could have made sets or, found a location, but this was cheaper. And like,
exactly.
That does get frustrating.
It broke me, and not to make this a Lord of the Rings podcast again, but it broke me when the Hobbit trilogy was getting slapdashed through after its time in production hell, and Ian McKellen cried on set when he was just sitting in like a blue screen room.
Yeah.
He had come from making the original trilogy with like real sets, obviously with visual effects and with those things, but as it being a part of it and not the primary form of filmmaking where they just add it all in later. I feel like it just detracts from the experience.
I'm just so glad you brought up Lord of the Rings again. You want to know why? Because
tell me.
While it's not a Lord of the Rings podcast, my answer was the basic answer. What's a favorite movie that uses a lot of CGI, or just the best use of CGI? The Lord of the Rings trilogy.
The Lord of the Rings. Or the groundbreaking. It changed everything.
If I was to pick a entry, it would be Return of the King. I also could easily pick Fellowship because of the Balrog, but I think what the Lord of the Rings did for scale is phenomenal. The Battle of Pelennor Fields in Return of the King, with all those horses, because there is real horses and then there's a fuck ton of CGI horses, and it is not like it is so perfectly blended where yes, you could probably tell it's CGI if you were to really look, but naturally,
but you're not going to look.
Yeah,
if you're watching the film in motion, you don't notice it.
And going back to like how CGI ages or how things look compared to today to then, like I do think the cave troll, you can tell where it's like inserted in, and like you can kind of see the rough edges, but like there's so much time and care to the lighting, the composition, everything, that it doesn't matter that it looks like a big CGI blob. It like, because it just feels so appropriate to the scene because it's been crafted for the scene.
Yes. And it can just be accepted in it. You're like,
Yeah.
It's like your brain knows cave trolls aren't real, but it feels
That we know of. We don't know. There can
well.
be
I
cave trolls.
mean, what kind of podcast is this again? It just becomes cryptid hunters in episode 1.
We go from trying to talk about movies and games to we're not a Lord of the Rings podcast, but we're going to bring it up twice in our prompts. To we're now just talking about shit.
And now we're
there.
looking for real life cave trolls. This is going well.
Yes, but I do think, just kind of wrapping this whole prompt section up, I do think the Lord of the Rings is a lot. It has to be the big gold standard and big moment in cinema history that said, you can do this. Like, you can make this work blended together with real people, real sets, but also completely digitized, created things blended in. And it works so well. And I don't care how rough it might look in 50 years, the storytelling and everything upholds so well that I don't think anyone will ever be like, ew, that looks gross.
I mean, it's like for the same reason. Like you look back to kind of like the classic era of films. Like I can still very happily watch like the 1930s King Kong, and like that movie has got some jank to it. But it's like when you think about the level of care and pre-planning that goes into blending these types of effects with real actors, with real sets, kind of, especially when they don't have computers to do that kind of stuff. It's like, I'm just so in awe at the success of the production alone. And then you put in like the good storytelling, the good acting, and like all of the care that goes into it. I just like my films with a little bit of intentionality. I like that. Yeah. I like for everything to feel like it matters, and like that there was someone every step of the way being like, we're doing this for a reason, and not just because it can, we can quickly blend this, or like, sorry, Samuel L. Jackson wasn't available for filming today, but we'll pick him up a couple months later, and stick him in the room, and we just kind of do like weird mid shots of everyone having a conversation because no one's ever around at the same time.
The way today's standard for filmmaking, especially on big Hollywood blockbuster level, is we're going to make things to make them convenient, not make things because there's like full passion. And I'm not trying to like totally say like these big blockbuster movies aren't made with passion. It's just that there are inserts of, well, we can't get this person, so we have to film it this way because of these reasons, and I'll make it easier to do this later. And it's like, that sucks, because imagine like having a full plan for your movie and then just completely like being like, well, because of these restrictions and these scheduling conflicts, we literally have to make it look very bland and like the rest of everything else out there, because it's just like, that's all we can do with what we have.
And with the time, it's the turnaround times are just, it's like, I'm not proposing that I can solve it. I just know what isn't working for me as a viewer. So
yeah, and my final remark on it is, I think one of the more interesting viewpoints recently is when we went into lockdown, we still had essentially had 2 Marvel movies that were finished and they just needed their VFX work, and they had a whole extra year. And they didn't go in and spend a whole extra year working on the movies. They were just like, no, we'll keep them as is. And I think that's so interesting, because it just shows that they're like, they don't want to spend the extra time and money and resources on it. Because it's like, clearly, like, you had the time to make things polished. Like, you don't have to go like crazy rework. You can just, touch things up because you have the time. And they really didn't do that, because there's a shot in Black Widow that came out like a year after the pandemic started.
Oh, no.
Which has this horrible green screen and like layering effect. And it's like, no one watched this for the last year just going, this looks bad. Could we fix this?
With like the large explosion shrunk down to be small to fit this. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah. And like, here's the thing too. I mean, it's like, if you're showing up for a McDonald's burger and you give them an extra hour to make it, I mean, why would they go out and like get you a sirloin steak instead? I mean, it's kind of like it is like the quick hit. I don't mean to call it fast food because that is diminishing of the efforts that go into it. But like, I don't hear people talking about a lot of the Marvel movies that came out 2-3 years ago because there's just 9 more. There's always the new one in front of us. There's no time to look back or rewatch or reflect.
We definitely live in an oversaturated market, and that will definitely be a conversation for another day because that is a long conversation.
Yes. But here, and let me give us a perfect segue into talking about our main course tonight, because you want to talk about an oversaturated market. I think this is one reason why we wanted to talk about Puss in Boots, because it felt like such a breath of fresh air from everything else that has come out in the last, I don't know, 2-3 years at least, that I don't know, I was very enamored and surprised by Puss in Boots.
And so I think it is a great time to jump into our main topic. So let us dig into the feast that is Puss in Boots: The Last Wish.
Who is your favorite fearless hero? Who is your favorite fearless hero?
Puss in Boots: The Last Wish was released on December 21st, 2022, with a budget of $90 million and has accumulated a box office total of $450 million so far worldwide. This is the 6th entry in the Shrek franchise and is a sequel to 2011's Puss in Boots. Alright, so before we get directly into the meat and bones of the movie itself, I want to talk about initial thoughts when coming out of the movie, and also who peer pressured you into seeing this movie.
Well, I have to be completely honest. You peer pressured me into seeing this movie. It had been, I'll be honest, not on my radar at all. I don't think I had seen any marketing for Puss in Boots, outside of maybe like 1 or 2 retweets on Twitter at the time. And you'd mentioned it offhand at one point, and I was like, oh yeah, I do feel like going to see a movie in a theater, which had been something that I had not experienced in a long time. And I was torn between going to see this or the Brendan Fraser Renaissance The Whale. And I was like, yeah, I'm kind of thinking about seeing one or the other this weekend. What do you think? And you were like, you need to see Puss in Boots.
Watch Puss in Boots, watch Puss in Boots, watch Puss in Boots, watch Puss in Boots.
It was like you need to see it in the theater. Like you need this is the movie that you need to spend your money on right now.
And funny context here is I saw The Whale and Puss in Boots in the same day about 2 weeks prior.
What a fucked up double feature.
Well, I saw The Whale in the morning with my family because my parents were like, "Oh, we want to go see The Whale because we like Brendan Fraser." I love Brendan Fraser as well.
Who doesn't?
We're all kind of in that Brendan Fraser renaissance where we want to support our boy because it's good to see him back. However, I saw The Whale and thought, I have my opinions on it. It's not my favorite thing. I think there's some good things in it, but I went and saw Puss in Boots later in the day, and I just was like, I need everyone that I know to go out to the theater and watch this movie, because at that exact moment in time, the movie was not really expected to perform well because it had just been kind of dropped in front of Avatar. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh no, this beautiful movie is going to get smothered and no one's going to watch it. It's going to get
Titanicked by James Cameron, yeah.
I was genuinely worried because I'm like, I just saw something that I think everyone is going to enjoy, but no one's going to see. And it hurts me so much. So that's why I had to tell everyone. So yes, I was definitely the one to peer pressure you. So let me know what your initial thoughts were coming out of that experience.
Yeah, I mean, I was incredibly thankful for the peer pressure because, I mean, man, this movie went to places that I was not expecting. Honestly, pretty much from right off the bat, like after like the kind of like goofy musical introduction to Puss in Boots, like I didn't know what was coming next, and I was really amazed. Like, I don't know, I was like legitimately scared at times. And like, I'm a grown ass man, and I'm like looking at all these like families with their young children's in the theater. I'm like, how are you not crying? Are you okay? Whereas I'm like, what the hell?
I love that because again, when I saw it, I'm a grown ass man watching, what people say is a kids movie, and I've got kids behind me in the audience, like totally like doing like the hiding in their hoodies or hiding in their coats because of certain things happening in the movie. And for me, as an adult, I'm like, yeah, I'm the same fucking way. I
am right with you. Yeah,
I'm probably
it's like,
20. I'm 20 years older than you, and I am wanting to tuck my like face into a hood and like peek through my fingers watching, because it's like, holy crap, the stuff that this movie touches on and like does visually is like, not only is it like crazy inventive and creative, it's also just like, it's so like emotionally engaging that you're like, oh god, I'm in it. Like I'm right on the roller coaster ride with you, and you've completely locked me into the seat.
absolutely. I mean, it's like I was. So like, here's the deal. I am not plugged into the Shrek cinematic universe, right?
What?
Like,
You're not?
I've seen Shrek 1 and Shrek 2. Haven't seen anything past that. When you said this is a sequel to 2011's Puss in Boots, I was like, what? there was one before this? Like, I thought they were just going off on that. Like, I knew nothing. So like, I think a lot of the characters that I was shown or introduced to, I don't know if they appeared in previous Shrek movies or whatever, but like I was bought in. I was connected to the outcome for all of these characters, whether it was silly or if it was like more touching. And I think as we're, I'm feeling like as this conversation, I feel like we're hedging on this conversation right now. So this is my moment to say, listen, if you haven't seen Puss in Boots and the Last Wish, we're going to talk about some motherfucking spoilers. So,
Spoiler warning!
You've been warned, okay? Like, I can't keep hedging around things that happened in this. If you haven't seen the movie and you don't want it ruined, I don't know how you ended up listening to this podcast. So, there's your thing, okay?
There's the warning. There'll be a big flashing graphic on this audio file, and you'll know. You'll get a
warning.
Your iPhone will actually light up while driving, and it will cause you to crash because of how the just deafening graphic sound I put on. No, yes, there will be spoiler warnings, and we're just about to get into it. My final touch before we jump into this is oh man, my brain just went full spaghetti mode. We were talking about sequels. This movie is technically a sequel. It's a spin-off and a sequel to a spin-off.
Oh my.
And I did not see 2011's Puss in Boots. I've never seen it. I still haven't seen it. I haven't been like, oh, I saw The Last Wish, I need to go watch 2011. I
don't feel any desire.
I think
if I'm being honest,
I think
like
that is the biggest plus to this movie. It does not feel like you have to watch anything else to enjoy it. There is obviously some references, which is fun, but like, I've seen the first 4 Shrek movies when they came out. I've never gone back to revisit them, and then I never saw Puss in Boots. So I have essentially been removed from this franchise for 12 years, and I'm glad I've been removed from it for 12 years because I feel like this was like the freshest way for me to get into it, and I'm just glad this movie isn't so nostalgia bait. It isn't so locked on like the, hey, you remember Shrek? It's very much its own thing. And I think that is a wonderful, beautiful thing that more movies should take risk on is, hey, we might be a part of this big cinematic universe or whatever, but why don't we just make something with a lot of love and care that can just be enjoyed on its own without feeling like it's all connected?
I fully agree with that. Like, one, it made for like a way less intimidating barrier to entry. It's like, okay, so I didn't need to see the last like 5 things if I wasn't able to or didn't want to. Great. Like, let's just get rocking and rolling with it. And I think it is a good lesson for things that even if you are stemming off of the same existing like an existing franchise, an existing property, like you can use these characters in a way where it doesn't always have to be pointing the finger back to what came
Yes.
before, because I think that does a disservice to the story that you're trying to tell me right now. If I am someone that is weirdly invested in the Shrek cinematic universe and have not sought help from a medical professional for that yet, then you probably don't need to be telling me, remember when Shrek did that? Of course I fucking remember when Shrek did that. What is Puss in Boots doing now? So that's something that I liked about this.
I just like the idea that if there is some major Shrek enthusiast, they actually probably could end up on this because they're like trying to hear every thought piece on this movie, and they just heard you call him out, and they're like, "Fuck this guy."
Well, listen, you're unwell, okay? Like, you can like what you like, but please, please.
But now that we've kind of did our intro about the movie and just talked a little bit about our initial thoughts, I do just kind of want to break down into how this movie opens up. So we get the lovely Antonio Banderas playing Puss in Boots give us this nice little intro line where he's like,
Starlight, star bright, first star I see tonight. I wish I may, I wish I might have this wish, I wish tonight.
and that sets up the plot that will happen about 30 minutes into the movie, because if there is a gripe I have, it takes a little bit to start. There is exciting stuff, but the actual main plot does take quite a bit of frequency that you kind of forget that this is how the movie opens.
I agree. I was actually really fucking confused at the start of this movie. I was like, what's happening? You know?
I think this was added. I think this is probably one of the few things in the movie that was near the end, and they're like, oh shit. Like, we just kind of start the movie, and we don't have anything really addressing to, like, the main, like, the last wish, which is this magical wishing star that you can grant any of your you have one wish and you can have anything granted. So I think they realized, oh, we need to have something allude to this, because it is kind of weird that if you remove this scene, because I just rewatched this movie literally a few hours ago, if you remove the scene and then have the movie start as it goes, the wishing star is introduced as a weird background conversation to Goldilocks and the Three Bears, and Puss in Boots.
Oh, that's deep into the movie too.
Puss in Boots hears this as an like he's listening in, and he hears them. We need to get to the wishing star, and he's like, the wishing star exists, and it's like, oh man, like if they didn't have this one line added at the very beginning, this would be like, okay, what the fuck is the wishing star?
That'd be completely blindsiding as far as like, hey, here's a real motivation for everyone. Okay, that's interesting. I'm actually really glad that you rewatched this so recently to realize that, because it did feel, some of the like introduction stuff, it felt fun. It felt a little jarring, and
it feels jarring on a first viewing, and I feel I felt exact, and I know I think you've only seen this once, but
yes.
You know, I enjoyed the opening song number the first time, but I was a little bit like, we're doing the typical kids movie opening number, and we're kind of, but then like as it goes, forward, it's like, this really epic action sequence with this troll that looks beautifully animated, because they do this frame rate chopping where they essentially cut down the frame rate like Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, and just have these, very beautifully just frame by frame
choreographed action sequence. Yeah,
like everything looks great, and that's why like the song works, because you're like, you don't really care about the lyrics of the song. You're just like, oh, this is a really cool sequence of events.
Right.
But the first viewing, I was kind of like, yeah, I get it, and like they set up that Puss in Boots dies, and then it sets up his whole 8 lives. He's burned through 8 of his lives arrogantly, and he's on his final life. And they're definitely setting up the things that happen later in the movie. But it definitely feels like the movie has like 5 starts, and it's kind of like, we're going to go back to Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings Return of the King has like the joke of like
5 endings. Yeah.
5-10 endings, where Puss in Boots has 5 starts, because it has Starlight Star Bright, then it has Fearless Hero, then it has the, hey, you died, you need to figure out what you're going to do with your last life.
You need to retire,
and then he retires,
so you don't die. Yeah,
you don't die, and then it gets to the bears coming in being like, we need to find the wishing star. It's like, oh, this is
here's how I can get my lives back so that I can continue to be the fearless hero. It's like it all threads, but it does feel like a lot of like, okay, we're building. Like it's been 12 years since we've had a Puss in Boots movie, so we need to kind of reintroduce people to the character, I guess. And like that's all well and good, but I actually remember sitting in the theater and kind of like looking around during the opening song, being like, I feel like I'm just watching the trailer, but it's like 7 minutes long, and not knowing why I'm actually here.
Yeah.
So,
and I think that's like, if there is a critique I have of this movie, it is, I think the first 25-30 minutes takes a bit to get going, and it feels like it starts several times. However, on rewatches, those first 30 minutes become a lot more enjoyable once you know where the story goes.
Yeah.
So it is, I do give the movie like the benefit of the doubt. It's like on a rewatch, I think it flows much better, but on the first time, I do think there is a bit of there is cause to critique the fact that the movie just kind of like starts and then stops and then starts again and then stops. It's like, I get they're trying to get to the main plot, but they kind of judder through and just start just going, all right, this thing happens up and now we're pulling the rug away. And then this thing happens and we're pulling the rug away again. So it's like, it does take a bit to get started. And I can see why some people might be like, I'm kind of confused where this is going.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's like, but also to its credit, I mean, and to what you're saying, it all does matter. Like none of that time is, none of it is wasted. It's just one of those things where like at the start, you're kind of like, oh man, I don't actually know. For me, maybe it was because I'm not plugged in to the Shrek cinematic universe. I was like, I don't know anything about Puss in Boots. So it was kind of helpful, but also I felt like I should have been in on the joke more.
Well, and for me, Puss in Boots was always the joke was because he was introduced in Shrek 2, which is like the one I remember. Shrek 1 and 2 are the ones I remember the most, and it's the ones you've seen. Puss in Boots is essentially just Antonio Banderas playing his Zorro character as a cat.
As a cat, right?
And it's always meant to be just kind of a joke and just kind of fun and playful. And fun and playful is still here. It's just the amount of emotional depth they're like, hey, that Puss in Boots sequel that we have to make, because DreamWorks probably said, hey, we need a new movie to have released in this time frame, and we want it to be like one of our franchises. So you can just like make a Puss in Boots movie, and they're like, yeah, we're not just gonna make a Puss in Boots movie. We're gonna make a Puss in Boots movie that just like goes as hard as humanly possible.
We're gonna make a Puss in Boots film.
Yes. Like Martin Scorsese's gonna come out of this going, this is cinema.
This is cinema. And in total fairness, it did. Like, I don't really know where to go next with talking about it, because like
I think a lot of people have done really good breakdowns that we don't need to go into every minute detail of the movie.
Right.
However, so just to kind of roll through the plot here. So we have the opening song number, which is a song about him being a fearless hero, which is a big musical number, essentially, of him being this great, just beloved legend of a hero. But he clearly, throughout this song, he's this very arrogant person. He doesn't have any fear of death. He is just very, careless and can do whatever because he just thinks nothing can touch him. And that's why I think this song works when you go back, because you're like, oh, this totally sets up everything about the movie.
All the motivations for everyone. Yeah.
So the song happens, he defeats this troll that he saves the town from, but he's also the one who woke up the troll, so it's that kind of nice, like, he's actually still the reason that this destruction happened, and he doesn't care about it because he gets to be a hero at the end of the day.
He's like, look what I did. It's amazing. It's like also your fault, but okay, cool.
Yeah. So he, at the end of this battle, he has this, the song numbers ending, and you think in the trailer, they actually show the bell falling on him, killing him at the end of this like number. But what I think is interesting is that the number ends, he's like taking in all the love and praise, and then he's like, oh, you want another song, because that's how high, like, up on himself he is. And the second he starts this other song, the bell just drops on him, kills him, and then he dies. And then he wakes up in the doctor's office. They go through his 8 previous deaths, because they're like, hey, you're on your last life. This is kind of serious. And he's like, no, I'm Puss in Boots, whatever. Then we get to the thing that we're going to probably just talk about the most here.
Yes, the bar scene.
The bar scene that introduces the best part of the whole movie.
Holy smokes. All right, let me take this one because I have so many feelings about this. So after Puss in Boots is told that he needs to retire from adventuring, otherwise he's going to die for real this time, he says, "You're wrong. I'm Puss in Boots." And he goes and he starts slugging back glasses of milk at the bar, which I thought was really funny. While he's chilling at the bar, he's all alone. And I think that that is an important piece of it, is no one is actually hanging out with him, right?
With the legend, with the fearless hero.
With the legend. It's like no one wants to spend their time with him until this large wolf sits down next to him and he's like, "I'm a big fan." And it's immediately very unsettling. Like you kind of feel like, yo, is this guy like, I'm like, is this guy like a bounty hunter? Is he just like here to like
and
kill Puss in Boots?
And right before he enters, the way you get acknowledge of his entrance is this whistle that he has.
Yes.
And it's this just hauntingly chilling whistle. And it totally sets the mood. And actually, I'm just going to insert this. This is where Marvel like MCU movies have like the comedy has totally ruined some things for me. Is because in the sequence where he's like, "Oh, I'm a big fan." And I was like, "Oh, is this cool wolf character just going to be some weird like stalking offshoot stalking fan?" Because my brain is like, "Oh, they're gonna set up he's gonna be this intimidating, and it's gonna be this joke that he's not this intimidating." And I'm so used to Marvel just doing this stupid like making cool characters dumb that I was like, "Oh, my heart was already ready." And then the sequence continues, and he's like, "I want you to sign right here," and he has this wanted poster with the dead or alive, and he's tapping the dead text a few times, and it sets up probably the coolest action scene in 2022, which is weird to say that Puss in Boots: The Last Wish has the coolest action scene in a movie.
Best action in that we saw the entire year. Yeah. Yes. It's like all of a sudden, like, the wolf is like, "All right, we're going to fight. We're going to do this fairly." And he gets scary. Like, we're talking like red eyes, dual wielding fucking sickles like the Communist Party. It was amazing. And he completely outmatches Puss in Boots, which is obviously a big, slap to the pride. But what's kind of unreal is like Puss actually he's scared. Like he's actually
your fearless hero has fear.
And he finally feels it. Like he feels like the seriousness of the situation that he's found himself in. And that kicks off, I think, one of the best like subplots. Like I feel like this movie has gotten a lot of credit for its representation of mental health and anxiety and like those types of things. And I wonder, like, how much were they thinking to set off with doing that? Because like I think that they do a pretty good job of showing you what a basic panic attack looks like, even like as the course of this fight goes. I mean, in fairness, it's more like he thought he was actually going to die in that moment, but later, after experiencing that trauma, like it resurges over and over again for him throughout the movie. And I'm just like, obviously it's a through line, but did they think that they were going to get so much credit for their presentation of this? Or is it just unique because we actually have a male hero directly grappling with like the outcomes of mental health? I don't know.
It'd probably be good to dig in with like the actual like behind the scenes of how everything was created. I assume with how much it is involved with the story that there had to have been some long conversation about like, "Oh no, we want to show a complete like mental breakdown from being the top dog or top cat at everything and feeling like you're on top of the world and nothing can touch you to pretty much having all like core functionality start breaking down and just getting nervous and anxious about anything that could happen because you have this looming fear of death happening to you because now you're on your last life. You have to kind of cherish what you have because you don't know when it's going to end. And when you're someone as arrogant as Puss in Boots, as we see from the opening of the movie, It's more just like, I can't be this person, so now I'm going to be nothing because I can't be who I think I should be.
Who I think I had been, right,
Yeah.
for this entire time.
So that bar sequence is so cool because it is not only great choreography, but we literally just less than 5 minutes ago saw Puss in Boots do the most unbelievable actions of heroism to getting his ass kicked. Like, he just absolutely gets floored, and it's like, oh yeah, he's
Like,
not
not
winning
even
this.
he didn't stand a
Yeah,
chance.
yeah. There's not even like a moment where it's like, oh, he's got. It's like, no, he is outmatched in every single way, and it sets up this great, just like, oh, this bounty hunter wolf is gonna be after him this movie, and it's gonna be this really cool plot of just like running away because he's just terrified, and you're like wondering how that's gonna resolve itself. So I think people should just see the movie and they should break it down. So we're going to kind of just speed roll through a lot of the overall plot stuff because we don't need to break down every plot point. However, I think a good point to talk about this movie is it handles having a cajillion characters really well.
Honestly, yeah, like there were a lot of they kept introducing more characters, honestly, like pretty far into the film, and yet still giving them their own through line and like resolution and everything too. I was really impressed by that.
Yeah, so you have Puss in Boots, who's obviously your lead. You have Kitty Softpaws, who's actually is in the 2011 Puss in Boots. Obviously, I haven't seen it, so
Right.
I don't know the dynamics there. But like the movie does a good job of not feeling like you needed to know like that movie to enjoy this. And so Kitty Softpaws is clearly a former romance accomplice to their previous adventures. And then you got Perito, who's this therapy dog who, you know, when seeing the trailers, I thought was going to be the most annoying character because I thought he was going to be the character that you dumb everything down for kids and you treat kids as idiots. But no, this is like arguably a lot of people could say it's the best character in the movie, and I could understand why they think that.
He is the heart of the movie, and
Yes.
I also, even because like I hadn't seen a lot of the marketing, like I said, so it's like even upon Perito's introduction, I was like, I think I'm gonna be annoyed by you, and it ended up not. That was far from the case. I was like, oh my god, he's so cute, so sweet, so pure. This movie would not be this movie without this jacked up looking little dog.
So you got Perito, and then it also, if you don't know, Perito just translates to puppy or dog in Spanish. So it's literally just dog or puppy. That's the name. Which, furthering a point, this movie actually has no subtitles, and it has a lot of spoken Spanish, which I really appreciate. That it doesn't have to put subtitles to be like, oh, you don't understand language. It's just, no, you understand by the context of what they're saying. Like, you don't necessarily understand directly what they're saying.
Word for word, right.
But you understand what they are, the intention or whatever emotion they are feeling is coming out.
Yes.
So I think it's a really good thing. And then you get Goldilocks and the Three Bears, and then you get Jack Horner and his dozen bakers. So this movie technically has 3 villains, and it has 3 main characters. And most movies with 3 villains, people say that's a bad movie. That's a sloppy
Spider-Man
movie.
3.
Spider-Man 3, Amazing Spider-Man 2. Just a lot of movies, when you have multiple villains, it becomes messy and there's not enough focus and it just gets lost. And this movie, I think, does it really well because its 3 villains are all 3 different types of villains. The wolf is your just looming threat. Goldilocks and the Three Bears are your sympathetic villains, where they're not really villains, but they're technically the antagonist.
Right.
And then Jack Horner is your comically just bad person villain.
Yes.
Like, he's
scenery chewing.
Yes.
Like,
He is
quintessential bad guy.
Not meant to be good, redeeming anything. And that's actually so fun because of how many villains in the past 10, 15 years of storytelling that have been like, oh, I'm not really a villain. This is just my tragic backstory. And Jack Horner is just like, no, I'm actually just a privileged kid who inherited greatness, and I just
and
want
I'm
more.
salty about it. Yeah,
and
like,
I want more.
I need more.
And he definitely has probably the funniest scenes in the movie, because there is so much murder in this movie.
He is so wantonly cruel that it was just
Which
amazing. Yeah.
Which great enough too is that like there's been a lot of Pinocchio this year or for 2022.
There has been an obscene amount of Pinocchio.
And it's great because Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, which was at that point in time the movie that was like, oh, this is the clear, clean sweep of best animated feature. And it probably still will be, but this is definitely Puss in Boots is definitely the movie to rival it, but it's just great because Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio has Jiminy Cricket, played by Ewan McGregor, what's the full cricket name in that version? It's like
Sebastian J. Cricket.
Sebastian J. Cricket. And it's like you get the typical, what that character is supposed to be for that story. And then you get the Puss in Boots version of Jiminy Cricket, which is the funniest
the best Jimmy Stewart impression I've heard in like 10 years. It's like when the actual Jiminy Cricket, who for reasons could not be called Jiminy Cricket, but was very obviously Jiminy Cricket,
yes,
pops up and he's like, "You're a bad person. You need to do better."
Oh, I'm your conscience, Jack.
I'm going to make sure you don't do anything bad. It's remarkable. And honestly, probably one of my favorite parts of the movie, because every time he was on screen, I was cackling.
Well, and it goes back to the whole, like, your comically bad villain, like your villain who's just pure evil and has no redeeming qualities, mixed with the character that is essentially supposed to be like, well, like, maybe there's a brighter side to life. Maybe there's something to change this person's perspective. And it's like, nope, this person just doesn't care about their army of henchmen. They don't care about anything except themselves, and it is just great watching this cricket just lose its mind throughout the course of the 20 minutes of screen time that he has, because it's just like he's just like watching Jack Horner deforest an entire garden, and is watching him just have his henchmen make a bridge out of their own bodies and then just let them all die. And it just leads to that great moment where he's like, that was horrible. This is all horrible. You're horrible. You're horrible. You're an irredeemable monster. And he's like, what took you so long, idiot? And then just flicks him away. And you're like, holy shit.
It does a good job of subverting your expectations of what we've almost been trained from to expect with villains at this point. It's just like, no, I'm just bad, and I like being bad.
And it works so well for this movie.
It's fun. It's just it's funny. It's entertaining. It's no deeper than that.
I will say, I just remember one of my favorite lines in the movie is, "Oh, you wouldn't shoot a puppy, would you, Jack?" In the face, yeah. Just. It's like, holy shit. So yeah, this movie does a great job balancing characters, and the journey that all the characters goes on is very rewarding. Like, Jack Horner obviously doesn't really have an arc besides, I just want to become more evil, which is fine because his scenes are really fun. But Goldilocks and Three Bears has a really interesting subplot of you're like, oh, they're all going to get this wish, and you're kind of curious what the wish is, because they're this, family of, oh, we have this orphan human daughter, and it's a great choice that they're this British crime family. That's amazing.
Oh my god, I loved all the voice work for the Three Bears.
But
it's incredible.
I think what works so well is that you essentially are like, all right, they're clearly antagonists to Puss in Boots and all this, but they have their own motivations. Like, what's their wish? And you find out near the end of the movie that Goldilocks is like, I want a real family back. And it's this heartbreaking moment that it's like, wow, this is why this movie handles all its characters so well. It's because you actually care when the bear, Mama Bear and the family gets hurt by that, because they're like, oh, we don't consider us
your
family.
Real family, right?
But they do the thing that is more heartbreaking, which is like, if this wish will make you happy, we'll go help you do it. And it's like, oh my god. Like,
You're right. They just shoulder it because they actually do really
yeah.
care about her. Yeah. Oh man, like the whole Goldilocks subplot. Like we were talking before we hit record on this podcast, and it was the Goldilocks subplot that actually like got me at the end of the movie, because it's like, as I've been getting older, we've talked about this. As I've been getting older, it's a lot easier for movies to hit the heartstrings.
Yes.
I'm much quicker to weep when things happen, because I'd like to think that I'm just a healthier, more in touch person with myself. But oh boy, I was not expecting to cry about the fucking three bears. Like I was like,
You went into Puss in Boots and you cried about bears. How do you feel?
yeah, it was not on my bingo card, but I was like, I think it's telling, like the family story of that hits, and like the want to be accepted, but also like have what you think is the right thing, is really interesting. And I think that like turbulence in specifically for Goldilocks is really, really interesting. And it's probably like fairly rote storytelling mechanic of like, oh, your family was the one you had all along, but like it worked really well this time.
I think because there's always the argument of like there's no original stories, and it's like, sure, if there's no original stories, but there are always new ways to tell those stories.
Yes.
And I think this is a good example of that, because it is definitely like the typical like, oh, what you had was actually just right in front of you. You don't need this grand thing. Like, you can just enjoy what you have. And like that's kind of what the whole movie is with both Goldilocks and Puss in Boots, is embrace what you have in front of you. And I think both ways they tell that message are very effective.
Yes.
So because we've essentially covered just the core beats, we're not going to go into every moment, but there's two more moments I really want to talk about, and we're going to backtrack a little bit because we just talked about Goldilocks and her emotional moment. But so in the scene where the three main plots of Goldilocks, Jack Horner, and Puss in Boots all encounter in this canyon area, and Perito gets captured, and it turns into this big action sequence with unicorn horns getting shot, killing henchmen, and all this stuff going on. So Puss in Boots doesn't actually have a sword because he lost his sword in the bar fight, which I think is a great element to essentially disarm your hero early on. And he doesn't actually do much fighting in the movie because he is the person that would be the best fighter. So it's nice to take that away. However, so the sequence is essentially all these characters just haphazardly just doing crazy shit because they're all like, yeah, we, are big fantasy creatures. We can do all these crazy things. But Puss in Boots is essentially dodging, ducking, diving, just trying to stay alive because he's clearly now more cautious of his mortality. And then the moment that is essentially Jack Horner kills one of the henchmen, that these unicorn horns get shot in and they explode, which is a very violent death.
Honestly, yeah.
It's very violent. But essentially Puss is held by one of these henchmen. The henchman gets shot, so Puss goes flying due to this explosion, and this causes a new appearance of the wolf, and he hears the whistling, and you see Puss's fur activate, which is the sign that he's clearly anxious or just afraid. And he, instead of this whole epic fight that's going on where Puss would be the star of this fight, just runs away. He just runs off, and Perito sees this and he runs after Puss. And this causes probably, I think, the biggest talking point of the movie for most people.
Yeah.
Because Puss in Boots, played by Antonio Banderas, in a kids' movie, a part of the Shrek franchise, has a full-on panic attack on screen, and it is shown not for a laugh, not for like cheap thrills. It is shown very honestly, and
it's really raw. It is a really raw moment, and
the best part of this moment is when Perito catches up, and it's not like, oh, Puss, like, I'm going to make a quip or a joke to get you out of it. He just rests his head.
He doesn't say anything. He just goes, oh.
And just rests his head, and Puss is just starting to kind of balance and ground himself and get his air back. And it's this sequence that is just so effective because there are no words. It is just raw visual storytelling, and it is so effective. And I think this is why this movie is getting a lot of praise, is because it depicts this very real life mental health moment that can happen for a lot of people, and it shows it in a way that doesn't feel like it's trying to be like, oh look, we're discussing mental health now, or oh
look how based we are,
or oh
like,
here's this joke to make the scene light or whatever. It's
and to undercut the actual like moment, right?
And I think it is beautifully handled, and it definitely hit me pretty hard in the movie theater.
I fully agree. You know, it's interesting because I think it's an interesting vector to have it be in what is quintessentially a children's film. But like when you think about, kids don't go to movies on their own. You know, it's like entertainment for kids is always made by adults, and it does have adults in mind as well. And I'd be interested to see like what sort of conversations this has sparked with families. And I think with this like shift and change in actually covering mental health in a more well-rounded way. Right now I'm watching Ted Lasso for the first time as well. And this is, it's so good. And I think it's an interesting crossover point, because I would say that like Puss in Boots and Ted Lasso are both quintessentially pretty like wholesome viewing experiences, right? Obviously Ted Lasso is not made for kids, but it's a feel good show. Yes. And I knew nothing about the show other than everyone's like, it's a feel good show. And I have been really impressed with how, and this isn't going to become a Ted Lasso podcast, but like I've been really impressed with how that show has handled heavier topics. And I like how it has also dealt with Ted's anxiety, and he was also experiencing a panic attack, and they do their own way of showing and visualizing that. I don't know if it's always necessarily as effective. They have gotten a little quippier with it, and they're kind of using it. We'll see. I haven't finished season 2, and I know season 3 is starting, but like it's gotten quipped a little bit, and they're using it in some sort of like plot direction. I'm worried that they are going to end it with just like, he's cured and doesn't have anxiety anymore. Cause like, I feel like that could be a misstep.
You haven't finished season 2. So I'll just say finish season 2, and your thoughts may be either different, the same, different, but it's a very good show. And I think where it goes is very effective.
And I think it's important regardless. And this is kind of to my larger point of like showing male protagonists dealing directly with like the consequences and outcomes of mental health, because unfortunately it feels very fresh from like a content and writing perspective. It really makes me sad to think that even like 5 or 6 years ago, you know, this it had been the butt of a joke, and that's unfortunate. But as someone who in 2022 had their first panic attack ever, I have to commend Puss in Boots specifically for illustrating that in what very, very closely matched my own experience. Obviously, I was not in actual fear for my life, but when you're having a panic attack, it doesn't feel any different from that. That's why you panic, is because your body doesn't know how to distinguish the actual threat factors anymore. And I just have to say it did a really good job. And I was like, yeah, that's real. Someone on the team did their research.
Or just the whole team came together.
The whole team was like, we made this during 2020, so we all now also have anxiety.
Yes.
I think that I like that they let it speak for itself, and they let it ride. And I think that was what made that scene so effective. So I have to credit them for their restraint in just letting the camera roll as if it was a real situation.
Yeah. And I think this is not a Lord of the Rings podcast, but to the whole male's mental health and really just having male characters emotional on screen, Lord of the Rings still very much shocks me because it's technically only in the extended cut, but in Fellowship of the Ring, there's a scene where Boromir and Aragorn are talking, and Boromir is very emotional and very open about his fears and failure as like to his father and to his people of Gondor and everything. And it's like every time I rewatch it nowadays, I'm just like, man, the fact that this came out in 2001, where like this is not what you would see from male action heroes,
Right.
is just crazy to me. And it's like, this is very effective still to this day. And like, I'm just kind of impressed that this got through, like it didn't get like fully like removed from the movie or the extended
it made it onto a disc that you own. Yeah.
So yeah, I think unfortunately there haven't been a lot of movies until about 2015 and onward where male characters can be shown being weak.
Right.
And it's just nice to see that. And so I think it is a really important thing that for a kids movie or a family oriented movie like Puss in Boots, that kids can kind of get introduced to the element of like, it's okay to be like emotional and be afraid, because that just helps you like understand yourself better. And it's also helpful for parents to be like, this is probably a good teaching point rather than, closing this in.
Exactly. It's like there are it's a good introduction to like how you can regulate those feelings and actually deal with it rather than giving yourself a 27-year ulcer like Spooky.
But yeah, I think the movie is very effective at portraying this, and it does not undermine it at all, which again, in the age of like the Marvel quippiness, is pretty impressive, because holy crap, if you want a movie to be upset about, go watch Iron Man 3, because Tony Stark has several panic attacks throughout, and then they just start playing it for jokes, and it's,
oh my god,
it makes me so mad, because it goes from a great movie to a very not good movie very fast
because of that. It's like he has PTSD, man up.
Yep.
Cool.
So we get this sequence, which is then kind of the big turning point for Puss in Boots, where he realizes maybe I should be more open and be more caring and be more honest with the people around me that I want to care about and want to have in my life. And so this is where you have this change of character. Instead of the fearless hero who can't have anyone around because he's, he only works alone, he now is more caring about having people around and being happy and being content. And so we get to, the final kind of point of the movie is going to be technically two different scenes, but it's the scene where he goes into the Chamber of Lost Souls, I think it is, where it's his 8 past lives all confronting him and kind of mocking him for being this wuss now rather than this strong heroic hero. And we get the next appearance of the wolf character, which we find out that the wolf isn't just this bounty hunter. What is the wolf, Spooky?
The wolf is the actual personification of death.
And it is something, and I love it too, because it's
something.
Because it's not just like, oh, I'm death, and it's like oh, but you're not actually death. And he's like, no, I don't mean it metaphorically or rhetorically or poetically or in any other fancy way. I'm death straight up, and it's like
I'm literally the Grim Reaper.
Yeah, and it sets up the final pace of the movie so well, because the sequence is essentially, you are a cat with 9 lives, and as death, this is very insulting for me, because I essentially get to watch you just throw them away. Yeah. And, my whole essentially rules is, I come for you at the end of your life, because you've either experienced or embraced what your life was, but you've just totally arrogantly tossed it away. So Death is like, I'm fed up with this. I'm coming after you now because you're this arrogant little shit that I want to get. And so Puss in Boots runs away, and he gets to the wishing star, which then leads to the final big action sequence of all these characters trying to fight over the wishing star, or the wishing star map to make the wish. And then we get the other great fight sequence in this movie, which is Puss in Boots versus Death.
Oh my god, this fight at the end.
This sequence works so well because of the bar fight, because the bar fight sets up this line of dialogue where he goes, "What's the matter? Lives flashing before your eyes?" And we see Puss in Boots flash through all 8 of his lives, kind of like reminiscing in fear of all this stuff. And then that line comes back again in this sequence. He goes, "What's the matter? Lives flashing before your eyes." And Puss doesn't have all these lives. He has this life with Kitty Softpaws and Perito, and he throws down the wish because he doesn't need it anymore. And he goes, "No, just one, and I'm done running away." And then that's what starts the fight, and it's so like, it is the coolest, highest stake, like emotional, like, holy fuck, I didn't realize that this was gonna go so hard. Like,
it goes so hard, and to your point, it's like, it's the perfect, like, again, it's like, it's a classic storytelling arc, but it does it magnificently well. Of like, no, I realize what I have now. I don't have anything else in front of me. I don't have anything else to look back on. It's just what I have experienced, and I'm not going to just let that go.
Yeah. And I love it too, because that sequence is, Puss technically has the ability right in that moment to make the wish and get his 9 lives back and be returned to who he was. And like, he essentially has his out, and he decides to say, no, I'm going to face my fears, and I'm going to face death, literally death. And so we get probably one of the most beautifully rendered, drawn, however they did it, fight sequences with these gorgeous flames and just frame rate dropping, so it all feels very kinetic, and it feels very like, just you every hit matters. And even, we didn't really talk about this, but Puss in Boots gets blood drawn in the first fight that causes him to run away in fear, and he actually gets blood drawn again in this, and is really interesting for how much blood is in this movie for a kids movie,
right?
But there's a scene where in this fight that he gets his foot slashed open, and you see like stylized blood come out, and it just is like, how crazy is it that, like, I feel like PG-13 Marvel movies are try and shy away from like too much violence, yet we're having
or too much of the outcomes of violence.
Yeah.
Right? Like, they never show any actual consequence to what happens, right?
Yeah. So it was just, it's so interesting seeing that throughout this movie, where it's just like, wow, I'm seeing this, and I know this is orientated for kids much younger than me, so that, like, bravo to you for finding a way to make it work, and also showing it. But we essentially get this great fight scene, and the Death and Puss come to essentially a draw, where Puss in Boots knows he can never defeat Death, because Death is, you can't run away. You can't run away from Death entirely. You can't forever beat Death. You're always going to have Death come for you one day. And it creates this great moment where the wolf essentially gets very frustrated and starts speaking a bunch of Spanish, like, frustratingly. And no one knows what he's saying, but obviously they know, like, if you don't know Spanish, you don't know what he's saying. But you know he's clearly frustrated because he is essentially losing his battle here to claim Puss's life. But if you go into the translation, he's essentially saying, I'm a fool for playing with my food again. So he essentially,
awesome.
So he essentially,
he's like, I ruined it for myself.
Yeah,
right?
like I took too long dragging this out, that now Puss actually is embracing his life, and I can't just take him because he's no longer the arrogant little legend who thought he was immortal. Which is that is I'm quoting the direct movie right there, so maybe I'll throw in the line.
That's incredible, honestly, because like it's again, it almost plays on this like trope, right, where the villain monologues for too long, and then the hero finds their way out. I mean, this happens a little differently. It's not like you get Hans Grubered off of a building, but it was kind of like you actually told me the answer that I was looking for, and I figured it out. So now
Yep.
your personal vendetta means nothing because I'm not actually being arrogant or wasteful with the life that I have anymore. And that's just
Yeah,
that's
it's
funny.
it's a great translation because if you don't know, you're just kind of like, oh, he's frustrated and he's accepting that he can't, as you know, whatever the rules of death are for this universe, he can't just take his life anymore. And when you get to that translation, you're like, oh, that's so wonderful that he's like essentially just like, I messed this up for myself because now I can't do this anymore. So I'm a fool.
I'm a fool.
But it does lead off to a great line that I don't think a lot of people talk about because I've I'm not judging people, but I'm judging people because this movie blew up on a lot of social media platforms like
Yep.
TikTok and such. There's a line where Death is walking away because he's saying, "Enjoy your life, live your life, Puss in Boots, live it well." And he goes, "You know we'll meet again, right?" And then Puss in Boots says, like, you know, yes, I know, and the wolf Death whistles away and fades away. There are people who think, oh, that means we're gonna get another Puss in Boots movie where he fights Death and Death. We're gonna have Death appear as a villain again. And I'm like, no, this is actually just a really like wonderful, like mature thing, which is essentially saying, you know, like just because you found your answer and you're gonna have this like enjoy in your life, you still will have to encounter me down the road. Like you don't get to still just, you know, live peacefully and never experience death again. You will meet me again. And it's like it's this great piece that I don't think people like. There's some people on the internet who just I don't think
People
they really
are-
picked
People are
up,
so poisoned by like sequel bait and like
Yeah.
what's the next thing that's coming? Like, oh, he'll fight death again and he'll win this time. And it's just like that's not the point that we're making. Actually, I mean, to that point and to like kind of this issue with like some media literacy or just like letting things be how
Yeah.
they are. I do have concerns because, you know, there is a tease for a sequel. Maybe it's Shrek 6 that they were teasing, but like there's a tease for like another movie in the Shrek world. And I just hope that for as cool of a character as Death is, I don't want him in the next movie.
I don't think Death should ever show up again in one of these movies.
I agree. And it's a
Because-
shame because it's great character design. And like, I understand that there will be a desire to bring him in, but like, then you lose all of the weight of everything that came
Yeah.
before, especially if it becomes like a buddy cop thing where it's like Puss in Boots and Death, we are a team. It's like, don't do that.
Yeah.
Like, don't bring him back and like because if you have Death on your side, then there can't be any stakes against whatever you're
Yeah.
facing next. It's
Because
like you have the Grim Reaper. That's not how.
And again, they even say in the movie, it is literally death. There is no like sugarcoating, or it is death. So if you were to do anything with that, you're playing with some rules and logic in a very poor way.
Exactly.
I also think if Death was ever to show up in a movie again, it would have to be a Puss in Boots sequel, and it would have to be a movie where Puss in Boots dies, like it is actually him dying on his last life, and essentially it's, you know, the very end of like, you know, whenever he was being on his deathbed, he's like, Kitty, I love you, Perito, I love you, thank you for being with me, blah. You would then see like Death coming through, like you maybe hear the whistle in the background, and it's like him ferrying Puss in Boots to whatever afterlife there needs to be for that.
Yes.
That's the only way I accept him returning, because him returning in any other fashion is just capitalizing on the hype and not caring about the story.
Exactly. And you know, it's like I I don't want to put words into anyone's mouth or anything like that, but I am just like so worried that it'll become like a production company versus like writers and artists where they're like, no, you need to have Death back in because he was cool.
The people really like Death, and since Death didn't die, we know we can always bring him back. So we're gonna
Right.
bring him back to make more plushies or whatever. And
And in fairness, oh my, first off, I want a Death plushie.
I want a Death plushie too.
I'll buy the merch, okay?
Yeah.
But yeah, and even if Death had died, you know what? They'll just do a somehow Death returned
Yeah.
kind of situation, and then
Because Death can never die.
we got Palpatine again. You know, it's like
Yeah. No, I just think that it's a legitimate concern, but if this movie forever remains contained, and at the end of the day, it always is going to be kind of contained because of how little they reference Shrek is really actually impressive. Because
it is.
I thought there was going to be a lot of nostalgia baits. There are two true moments in this movie that reference Shrek, and they are both very quick. One is the first lives flashing for your eyes, where you see a clip from Shrek 2. And then the other is Gingy from the Shrek universe is in one of the death sequences, like when the death montage. So besides
That's right.
besides those two, there isn't anything else. And then we're gonna close off talking about the movie here. This is my last like talking point: is you get this nice wrap up ending where it's Puss in Boots and realizing that he's going to embrace what he has in front of him. He wants to be with Kitty. He wants to be a Purito. And, you know, everyone kind of has their happy ending or like content ending.
Mm-hmm.
And then the title appears. It's Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. And then it immediately kicks into essentially an epilogue post-credit. And this post-credit is essentially like, oh, we, you know, stole the ship from the governor from the beginning of the movie, and we're going to far, far away, which is the place where the Shrek universe, the city, the main like area where the Shrek universe takes place. And my problem with this scene is this is the moment where I really wish they would have at least held off this scene until the mid-credit or post-credit, because the movie ends on such a nice note, and then it's immediately like, all right, Shrek 5 is on the way, everyone. And it's like, cool, but I don't care about Shrek 5 at the moment. I care about this movie. So I really wish you would have at least not immediately after, don't do end dialogue, Puss in Boots: Last Wish, and then scene. There should have been credits, then scene.
Yep. It's like before the credits start rolling on black, that's when you can do that. Yep.
Yeah. Because the scene itself is fine, and I'm okay with like alluding to like, oh, a new Shrek movie or whatever is happening. I get it, because they've been talking about doing a Shrek 5 forever. So I totally get it. It's a good way to set this up. However, I don't need it right after the movie ends, because then I just feel like, oh, now we gotta, you know, bait the next movie rather than just enjoy the movie we just saw.
I fully agree with that. And like, I used to think that like the post-credit scenes were fun, but now that they're like expected, I feel like movies that shouldn't be doing them are.
And I think kids' movies are totally in the right to do them, because I think it is fine to have an Easter egg for your movie.
Right.
And I'm actually totally a defender of like, if a Shrek universe movie wants to have a post-credit that might allude to another Shrek movie, go for it. It's just that when you have these other movies that are like, why do we need, you know, these random one-off movies to have like a post-credit, even if there's never going to be another movie? It's like, we don't need this. This isn't like, not every film needs to have something for the people who sit through the credits.
Right. Sometimes people should just sit through the credits so that they can see what an amazing production the film was.
Just enjoy
and how music. Many people were involved, and enjoy the licensed part of the soundtrack, and
a lot of film credits are original score. Some are like licensed copyright music, but like you know, a lot of times it's original score, and usually the score is pretty good. So
good.
Enjoy the music. But yeah, I think overall the movie is definitely in like my top animated films of all time because of how successful it portrays mental health, and it uses its villains, and just how fun it is throughout the entire time. I was very surprised by this movie, and I think this is definitely one of those, like, for the next 20 years, I'm probably going to bully anyone new I meet who hasn't seen it, because I'm going to be like, what the fuck? Like, you go see Avengers 10, 11, 12, but you won't watch Puss in Boots? Like, just watch Puss in Boots.
Just treat yourself a little bit. And it's funny because you've totally gotten me onto the evangelist train. After we saw it, I couldn't shut up about it. Anyone I talked to, people at work, I was like, hey, they wouldn't even ask me how my day was. They'd just be like, what's up, Spooky? And I'd be like, well, thank you so much for asking. I saw a movie this weekend, and it was the Puss in Boots movie. And I don't care what else you have going on in your life, or if you're allergic to animation, you should probably go watch this. I got my hair cut like the week after, and my barber was like, oh yeah, what have you been up to? I'm like, I just saw Puss in Boots, and it was like the raddest fucking movie I've seen in a while. And he was like, no joke, you are the fourth person today
Yeah.
that has said that exact sentence to me. He's like, literally, my plan was to go home, drink a beer, and play a video game. I'm going directly from here to the movie theater. Like,
Yep.
like it's had this really unique word of mouth effect.
Yes.
And like and in a way where it's like, I don't hear people talk about movies like this, or I haven't for a while. And that's exciting. That's really exciting.
The one of the best parts of this movie, besides the movie itself, was seeing it going, oh, this is really good, and then telling people to go watch it, and then people actually went and watched it. Like, you typically tell someone to watch a movie, they're like, yeah, I'll watch it when it comes to streaming or whatever. No, people went and saw it. Like, it kept doing so well week after week at the box office. I'm like, oh, this isn't dropping. People are constantly seeing this movie. I'm like, this is great. And it was great because I was on like a winter break from work when this movie came out, and when I came back, one of my coworkers was like, oh, I just saw Puss in Boots last night, and it was like so good. And I'm like, yes. And I'm just like so happy because it's like spreading. It's like more and more people just understand that like this is a movie to see, and
it's something special. Yeah, it's totally something special. And like, I mean, in fairness, it got me, like, I had not been, much to my chagrin, and this is probably going to lose us points on this podcast, but I hadn't been to a theater since just before the pandemic started. So it had been.
Was that your first theater movie?
That was my first theater movie.
Oh my God. I mean, great movie to have, but.
Oh yeah. It totally got me sold back on the whole thing, but it's just like, you know, there were just like a multitude of factors. Like, I wasn't excited about a lot of the things that had been hitting theaters. A lot of the things that I wanted to see in theaters, weren't in the theaters in my area. You know, it's like there was a whole bunch of stuff, and now I've gone a couple times. You saw the Fablemans. Went to like an animation show of shows, like a short film, like an animation short film festival thing. Like,
nice.
We're back, baby.
We're back.
But in seat. Like, I'm here. I'm spending $60 on popcorn and alcohol. It's great.
Hey, that's good, because that means I can start peer pressuring you into seeing other movies so that we can talk about them on here.
Well, I would say we need more content. So
content.
Yes.
However, this was the first episode of this podcast, and I made a rule saying 30 minutes minimum of talking and 60 minutes maximum.
Yeah, and we're almost 2 hours in.
Yeah, well, and, you know, some of this recording is a little bit of a lie, but, like, it's... I think we've had a good discussion the entire time, and I don't think any of it's been wasted air.
Well, we would say that, but you know.
Oh yeah, sorry. To the person in your car right now, I'm just glad that we've made your drive maybe a fraction a little bit better with our voices.
Yeah, for those of you who have been sitting in their driveway waiting for us to finish so you can go inside and eat dinner, we're almost done.
All right, let's talk for another 30 minutes. So
debated.
Another thing I want to do with this podcast is, after we talk about our, main topic, I have just a little game. I've picked it up from some other podcast, and I know a lot of people do this, so I'm not saying this is an original idea, and if someone coined it, I'm sorry that I stole your idea, but I mean, no idea is original anymore apparently, so I can steal it. It's fine. So after whatever movie or game or whatever we talk about, I just want to have a little game about what was the critical and audience reception score, whether it be through Metacritic, Letterboxd, Rotten Tomatoes. So I know too much about this movie that I unfortunately know all of the scores already. So I'm going to ask you, what do you think the Rotten Tomatoes score for Puss in Boots: The Last Wishes? And
Oh man.
there's the critic score and the audience score, and it goes to a max of 100%. So you have 0 to 100% to guess correctly for both.
Okay. So I feel like this has to be a certified fresh from
It
the
is.
critic side. Yeah.
I will give you
It's
that.
like-
It is certified fresh.
so that narrows the window. I think the critics would give this like an 87. And I think the audience, I mean, obviously I'm biased as an audience member, but I think the audience might skew a little bit higher than the critics for whatever reason. So I'm going to say the audience gives it like a 90.
You are wrong on both, and you are actually lower for both.
No shit. Okay, good job. Good job, people watching at home.
So the average critic, like the not the average, the aggregated critic score for Puss in Boots: The Last Witch is 95%.
Wow, from the critics.
The user score is 94%.
Wow.
So the critics actually have it a percent higher. So you're wrong on
Yeah.
that too. But yeah, it's held very strong on both
I would
levels.
say I'm happy to be wrong.
Yeah. Pretty crazy though, and in reference, I think the new Avatar movie has like a 76% critics wise and like an 87% user wise. So like this definitely has a decent leg up on what is considered, I guess, the third best selling movie of all time, even though no one talks about it.
Yeah, I haven't heard a single thing about the new
Yeah.
Avatar movie since it came out. And
I've seen it. I've forgotten about it though.
just in one ear out the other. Popcorn
Yeah.
movie. Again, it has its place. Popcorn movies have their place.
It has its place, and if it helps keep cinema alive, I will gladly let it exist.
Exactly. And if it keeps pushing technology forward, I'm not mad. I'm just probably not going to see it myself.
Exactly. So we talked about Puss in Boots. We had our little critics game. So before we close things off, is there any final thoughts you have about anything Puss in Boots, what you're doing for this month, or anything coming up that you want to talk about?
Oh man. I mean, just to save the airtime, there's nothing specific content-wise that I want to talk about right now, but I do want to talk very briefly about a purchase that I'm very excited about.
Ooh.
I am a I'm not like a Gaga Wes Anderson fan, but I'm a big Wes Anderson fan. Okay, like I like Wes Anderson's movies. I like what he does. I like his aesthetic. It's all great. I was at an arts event the other day, supporting my local arts, and I ended up bumping into an artist who had his own gallery space.
I thought you were going to say you bumped into Wes Anderson.
And I bumped into Wes Anderson, and it was incredibly awkward because he's a strange man in real life. No, I bumped into an artist on like this gallery floor, and I was just kind of like, I really liked his style. He does a lot of like watercolor type of stuff, and it's like he does a lot of pop art now. And I got to talking with him, and he's like, "Oh yeah," he's like, "I used to do all sorts of stuff." He's like, "I would do like custom movie posters for theaters." So he was like doing like custom artwork for like kind of like the art house theaters of like, hey, like we're re-showing Blade Runner. Can you draw us up a special movie poster for it? So he was doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And he did like a lot of horror based art. And then he's like, and then he's like, I'd kind of like to actually sell some of my art. So I'm going to make some more approachable things. So he started doing watercolor. Meanwhile, I have to say, I really like his horror artwork and everything, but he started doing watercolors, and that's what this whole gallery setup was at this event I was at. So he has like a bunch of like stuff of like the Muppets, which was really cool. He has a couple like Studio Ghibli things. So he had like a Howl's Moving Castle in like just black and gray watercolor. Looked so cool. I could not afford that one. And then like a Ponyo. He had some stuff from Alien. Like he did like a triptych series of Ripley from Alien 1, 2, and 3. And then he had a whole wall of Wes Anderson stuff. So like it was everything from what is the his newest one? The French
The French Dispatch.
The French Dispatch. So he had a bunch of French Dispatch ones. He had some Tenenbaums, and then he had a bunch of Rushmore as well. And Rushmore is one of my favorite Wes Anderson films. It's the first Wes Anderson film I saw was Rushmore, and to me, it's always just stuck out as like really iconic. And he had done a watercolor of Bill Murray in that movie, and he's just like chilling with his like sunglasses and his robe on, and his like cigarette hanging out of his mouth. And I bought it on the spot. So I was just I just have it's a really it reminds me of a good time. Is when I was starting to study film in college. It was one of the first films that I watched in one of my classes. My professor had written his dissertation on Wes Anderson films up till that point. So he was a big, a big fan and like a big evangelist for like that style of filmmaking. So it just reminds me of all that. And yeah, I was like, I'm going to buy this Bill Murray thing.
Yep.
So,
your finest Bill Murray, please.
Yes, your finest Bill Murray. It was just great talking to the guy too. So that's my film related thing. I've acquired some new film related artwork. Once the exhibit is done in the next couple of weeks, I'll pick it up.
Fair enough.
The end.
That's good. Yeah, I mean,
how about for you? Yeah.
This is like the core meat and bones of content that I'm going to try and work on. So this, if you're listening to this now, this either is going to be up this was up just recently, or this is up a long time ago or a long time from now. But I'm kind of excited to get this rolling, and I think this was a good movie to talk about first. So
it's a great start.
Yeah.
And we're going to go into all sorts of weird corners of the world with film and stuff. But.
If there's one point to just say before we close this out is Puss in Boots is definitely a kind of more like everywhere kind of movie where everyone's probably heard about it by now. We're definitely going to hit some weird corners where it's like, I've never heard about this movie once in my life. So like
there's going to be some deep cuts here, I think.
Yeah. And hopefully that, inspires people to seek these movies out, or they're just like, why would I ever watch that? But I'm just excited to see where this goes. And, we are going to try and rotate our best with movies and games and kind of interlink them. But it's, I feel good about this. I feel good about what this can be. So
I'm thrilled. I mean, it's like, here's the matter of fact, folks at home, is Rodgers and I would be doing this anyway.
Yes.
So
yeah.
It's really just nice to be able to share our thoughts and feelings with whomstever is out there and is interested in hearing us talk about it. And I'd love for people to find a way to join the conversation with us as well. We don't have any social media set up at the time of this recording, but you can find us on social media, and I'm sure the links will be in this aforementioned description that we can apparently put into podcasts.
Yes.
Very cool.
Probably.
And I don't know. It's like I'm bad at closing things up. I always get really rambly at the end of my live streams where I start telling people I love them and I hope they take care of themselves and they take care of others. And I hope you all do that too. We haven't known each other for long enough, new audience members, so I can't say that it's love, but I think I like ya.
Thanks for listening, Dad.
It's good to have you here.
Yeah, my one audience member. But no, I appreciate anyone and everyone who tuned in. I hope you enjoyed our Totally Not Lord of the Rings podcast.
It'll always be there, just under the skin. Don't worry.
Yes, that's a good movie, Under the Skin. We should watch that. Regarding that, appreciate everyone tuning in. I hope you all have a great night or a great day, depending on what time you heathen. So, appreciate you all. And then
Be spiraling. Thanks for listening to Aspect Ratioed. We will see you. We won't see you because this is audio, but we'll hear you, or you'll hear us next time.